a selected few, those who knew the lore, to those who could see beyond the veil and saw the world tree's core. As the old gods arise anew, foes are many, friends are few. Gather round and join together. Let us learn from one another. Meets in Midgard, what do they have to say? Meets in Midgard, we're gathering today. Meets in Midgard, hear the wisdom of the Lord. Meets in Midgard, promise you it'll be no bore. We speak of modern applications to the ancient ways of how to apply the High One's words in this present day. Not only Odin's wisdom, but Loki's cunning wit, and how no matter who you are no misfit. So whether you are near, or whether you are far, whether you are just beginning, or have been on this path and winning, you are welcome to join us here, and you don't need to fear. Even comb his hair, as the old gods arise anew. Foes are many, friends are few. Gather round and join together. Let us learn from one another. Meets in Midgard, what do they have to say? Meets in Midgard, we are gathering today. Meets in Midgard, hear the wisdom of the Lord. Meets in Midgard, promise you it'll be no bore.
That's fantastic.
What an awesome intro song. Thank you to Sanford Pure for that.
Outstanding.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Meets in Midgard. Today I have two very special guests with me. I have Topher Thorgroner. I think I got that a little closer this time.
Much better.
Thorgroner.
Thorgroner.
Thorgroner. Thorgroner.
Gotta roll that tongue. You know
I-
I know you know how to roll your tongue.
I do. I do. And Sanford Fjord Kaufman. Both people here today who, I say this about my guests on the show. There are just people that are of a certain caliber in the Heathen community, and both of you are just like on the top of this list. That I want to thank you very much for your time that you spend here, your energy that you're giving to us, and your wisdom that you'll be sharing with us as well. For those of you that don't know, I've had both of them on the show before. There is a list of credentials on both these guys. We could go on, but I've discovered that when I have two guests on a time, we tend to run long and we run out of time. So if you want to know more about them, go ahead and drop a comment. We could get back to you on that. Also, I'll be letting you know their social media and stuff if you want to reach out and get a hold of them as well. Topher, Sanford, welcome. Thank you for coming back.
Absolutely.
for having us.
Hey, so today, Ayla, hey Ayla, you would not believe who wrote that song. His name is Sanford Kaufman. He's a guest on our show today. He was gracious and generous enough to put together a song for me, working on the intro, an animated intro, and that'll be coming soon. But man, what a great way to start the show. A high energy with a song like that. Yeah. So today, hey Colby, we are talking about the modern heathen, and there's four sections that I broke it down into that we can go into. There's the core heathen concepts, what we bring forward from the past, what should be left behind, and the path forward. So it's a meaty topic. We've got a lot to discuss, and I say we just jump right in. How about you guys?
Sounds good.
Sounds good to
All
me.
right. So we'll go ahead and start. What do you believe are the most essential values or principles in Norse heathenry today? Topher, why don't you start us off with that?
I think the most important thing that we need to keep in mind is that, well, and I know this is coming up because I read the script beforehand for the questions, but Frith, I think, is definitely one of the most important things. Um, I've met people from all over the world, all over the country. I mean, I considered Sanford a good friend. He lives, I don't know, 500 miles away from me or something like that. But, you know, I've met really great people along the way, and just being welcoming, um, being there to, especially with baby heathens, being there to answer questions for them, and things like that, I think is super, super important in this religion because of, I mean, yeah, there's 1,000 books out there right now, but that people can learn from. But are you learning the right stuff? Are you learning something that people just made up? So I think Frith and being welcoming of others is definitely very important.
Hmm. I agree with you. And nowadays it's easy to do because of technology, but it also, leaves a longing if you don't have people like surrounding you immediately in real life.
Yeah,
So finding that balance of the two is important as well.
definitely.
Yeah,
Andrew,
I would like to say, with what he was talking about, the discipleship factor of teaching baby heathens, as the term is used. Um, if you don't have that fellowship and that camaraderie that's built and developed, that understanding of each other, it's very difficult for people to respect um, the input they gain from a more experienced heathen if there's not already that friendship, that rapport that exists. And so, if you want to raise up the next generation of heathens to take your place, because legacy is a very serious thing, it's spoken of throughout the lore.
mm,
You have to be willing to reach out and to teach these new heathens that are up and coming in order for them to be able to replace you, because you're not going to be around forever. You're going to die because all of us die. And if you have those people that can take and pick up the torch or the standard, so to speak, and carry it forward, that's a key. And without Frith, that's not going to happen.
hmm
It always makes me think about just how much knowledge has been lost, um, especially going back. You look at Iceland's a great example, I think, because of how Christianity took over there. But I just the amount of knowledge that I know had to have been lost along the way, just simply because it was outlawed, or you could do it, in your own private home, stuff like that. So there were great religious leaders, and all of that knowledge just went away, which is makes me sad when I think about it.
It
Yeah.
it does. It's a sense of it almost gives me like a sense of anxiety, like what are we missing? Is
Yeah,
there something like some key thing that we're missing or something that we can't fix that any longer. So now we are left to like build from here.
Yeah.
make something out of the remains, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fill in the gaps. And that's where UPG has its place.
Yes.
It fills in the
What
gaps.
what is UPG for the newcomer?
I don't know how the acronym, unverified personal gnosis. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's basically what someone does, if you have people that are in Utaseta and they experience and actually converse with divine beings and spirits, they're
Mhm.
going to gain insight into aspects. With my own personal practice, when I experience something with a deity, I try to draw the connections to the lore that we have that exists to
Mhm.
see, okay, is this accurate? Because one of the first things with dealing with spirits you have to remember is that, as was so poetically stated by Matt Larkin in Gods of the Ragnarok era, better lie. They do lie. They will
Mhm.
pretend to be something they're not because their motivations are not the same as ours because they don't exist in this realm and there's different priorities that they would have. And so
Mhm.
therefore, a Vetir that may not be could pretend to be, say per se, Loki or Odin. And if and I verify things against the lore to see, okay, does this kind of fit the stereotypes, say per se, of Odin and how he would, be portrayed there.
Mhm.
Does it fit him? And that's kind of like, because I'm very skeptical of spiritual connections because they lie and I can't trust them entirely until they prove themselves to me.
A great point. That is well said. Ayla makes a great point as well in the comments. She says, "I think that's intentional by the gods to force us to evolve, as far as parts of the history that we have that's missing, that went missing, and evolution is like a common theme throughout the lore. You think about it when Odin and his brothers, breathed life into man, uh, Ask and Embla, and then Heimdall, uh, establishing order. Those could be seen as like evolutions of mankind. And even in Ragnarok, when the humans that are come out of the ash, that can also be seen as maybe another form of evolution for mankind, one that we haven't reached yet, So I
Right.
think that's important. It's a theme that goes through the lore, and it keeps us our minds sharp and uh, evolving too. So great point, Ayla. And she also says at the same time, one needs to really develop a relationship with their God to recognize them. And that's spot on. Spot on. um, any more essential values or principles that Sanford that you
Excuse me.
think?
Well, with me, I go to the cornerstone, and it's my soapbox.
Mhm.
Autonomy.
Mm.
Without respect for autonomy, whether it's individual, social, spatial, um, you can't have breath. If you don't respect a person and admire them and honor who they are and understand that your actions, whether you even know of the existence of said entity, it can affect that entity.
Mhm.
Everything we do, it has the ripple effect, it goes out. And so, therefore, in order to honor, we need to know that everything from an animistic standpoint has an is a part of essence. It's part of Yggdrasil. And so therefore it's part of that collective Megan pool.
Mhm.
And whatever we do, it flows through.
Yeah.
Whatever you, me, or Topher do, it's going to affect the other one in an adverse or beneficial way, even if we may not even be thinking about that individual when we make that action. Because what we do affects the entire community and the world as a whole,
Mhm.
even the esoteric realms that exist outside of the physical space in which we live.
Mhm.
And I think another thing that's very important, at least very important to me when it comes to heathenry, is honor and truth, and I try to be honest to the point of painful sometimes. Because a lot of times when you're speaking truth to others, it's not exactly feel good kind of truth.
Mhm.
So, but to tell somebody an untruth to protect their feelings, I think, is doing more damage than not saying anything.
Mhm.
But
Right.
yeah, honor and truth, and
Indeed.
and sticking to your word, and doing what you say you're going to do, and taking care of your family, and all of that. That's those are good core concepts just in general, let alone being attached to our religion.
Mhm. I absolutely agree.
Indeed.
Well said. Yeah, I always feel like There are certain themes that are constant, throughout the lore, and living an honorable life is definitely one of them. And it's not like the gods always were honorable, and that's what it teaches us. And you learn from other people's mistakes, other people's experiences, and that's what we learn from that.
Yeah.
Very
And then,
important.
of course, one of my favorite concepts, their guilt. We all make mistakes because no one's
Mm,
perfect. Make it right. You know, um, we may insult somebody without realizing that it's insulting to them because we don't understand their culture or where they're coming
mm,
from. So therefore, part of honor is acknowledging a mistake and making it right. You know,
mm.
we may not have meant to offend, but we did acknowledge that fact. That's it's hard to do. I mean, but it's part of being humble, I guess.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people, I think, skip that part because it's easier to just like disassociate and walk away than it is to like confront the fact that you did something that hurt somebody else.
Mhm.
So, so uh, we were speaking about. Do you have anyone? I'm sorry. Anything else to say about that
No, I'm
person?
good on that.
Okay, all right. I want to make sure everyone is saying everything they have to say. So we were talking about Frith earlier. So how does the concept of Frith, peace and kinship, influence modern heathen communities? Because we know it was essential for communities back in the day just to survive. You know, um, farmers that depended on smiths, and smiths that depended on farmers, and the whole bit. It was intricate and bound together. But nowadays we're spread across everywhere. Frith has a wider net, so to speak. So, how does uh, Frith influence the modern heathen community?
For me, I kind of think it's the guiding principle. Because without that, you know, you'll be a solo practitioner for your entire life if you're not using that. And really, you kind of touched on it in the question, but to me, Frith was the foundation of community.
Mm.
Uh, for a group of people that walk around with axes and swords, you better be nice. Um, so we don't have that instant reaction or thing possibility. Somebody can say whatever they want online without getting punched in the face. But
Mhm.
um, I think Frith really, if you want to build a community, that's the only way you're going to do it.
Mhm. Agreed.
I guess with I guess with Frith, with me, I would say, um, you have to understand that the word Frid, in Old Norse is more than just peace and kinship. It's taking it further. It's bringing, it's the proverbial taking into one's bosom, which means that it's an intimate, close relationship. It means that you're going to have to be vulnerable to those other people because you actually care. They can actually hurt you because you have brought them into your life. It's not just we meet, we bloat, we have a stumble, and we talk about frivolous things. We're close. We're a family. You know,
Hmm.
when one of us is harmed, all of us are harmed and we care. The clan mentality existed within Norse society. And so if you have your community, your circle, and you share frith with them, they are an extension of you. And everything you do and everything you say is a reflection on them. And if we consider that fact and the joint and the mutual autonomy of every individual, it'll work out.
Mm.
And that's why it hurts, when someone betrays that trust and that confidence when you bring them close.
I think you make a very valid point. It's and you know building, I think building Frith on the internet is different because you can be emotionally distant, you know, it allows for that. And you're not getting that full experience. Like you said, you're bringing someone into your bosom and being vulnerable. And it's easy to hide behind a keyboard and a mask on the internet. So being authentic and being genuine is definitely key to that if you're going to build true relationships. Um, Brandon makes a comment that says a hall is built with hands and not words, right? Which is very, very true. Your actions and what you do is what's going to build that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would
So,
say that's why you come to the defense of someone else's, autonomy within Frith,
oh
127,
yeah,
Havama 127 is a key example. And that last stanza where it says to deny Frith, it's basically a complete disassociation. This person does not exist. It was like the concept within some cultures of shortening, where you would actually cut them off, and it was like every record of this individual was erased. So if someone violates the frith of your community because it's so essential, they don't exist anymore. They never existed. Everything they did was erased. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And
that's
that's what it is. It's a complete annihilation of that person's history.
and that's harsh. That is like harsh, but it is deserved. You know, at that point, when you have to reach that point, you know, those are the consequences of that.
Mhm.
And Ayla makes a great point as well in the comments. She says this is why folks need to think about that before they swear kinship oaths, because sometimes reestablishing frith is hard and humbling work, and that is
Indeed.
so true. It's easy to be wanted by a community and to be brought in, and you know, uh, uh, but you need to, if you don't realize the magnitude of frith and what it truly means, you're going to stumble in and make mistakes, you know, and it's take your time, build those relationships. Don't just dive right in and jump right in.
Quality over quantity
There you
when
go.
it comes to a kinship.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm sure you know the people.
Yeah.
You have 30 frickin' people in your kindred and they hardly know each other.
Mhm.
They just get together, drink some beers, talk some crap, and frickin' have a blow. That ain't fellowship.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
If you have 5 people that get together and they know each other personally, they know each other's struggles, they know each other's hardships, they are there for each other, they have each other's proverbial backs. As the Marines say, got your six.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah,
You know, these are your bros, these are your people. They got you. And
mm,
you would go into a war zone with them and know that what you can't see, they probably have, you know, their
right.
sector of fire. Yeah.
Frith leads that community in becoming like an extension of your family, basically, is what it comes to.
Hmm. Absolutely. Man, I got some good points going on today. We've only gone through 2 questions. All right, Topher, I'll let you lead off on this one. In what ways do you see modern heathen virtues aligning or conflicting with historical Norse ethics?
Well, I think, there's the obvious historical things that, we can and can't do today as opposed to in the past. If someone dishonored me or lied to me, I'd just split their head with an axe in the old days. But, obviously we can't do that now. Um,
Or slavery?
yeah, or slavery. Yeah, I can't go to Ireland and bring back my new redheaded wife. Something my current wife would like too much either. I don't think I survived that, but yeah. So things like that. There's definitely the obvious things, but it was just such a their reality was so much more harsh than ours.
Mm,
So when you think about something as simple as surviving the winter, you know, everybody in the modern world pretty much that has a home can survive the winter without any problems. There's food access, there's all that, but you know, in ancient times, if you didn't prepare right, you may not survive the winter, which I think that makes decisions, harder decisions, um, like which kid we're eating this year. I don't know, but yeah, it was just such a much more harsh reality for the Norse than what we deal with. Not that we don't deal with issues and problems and stuff like that, but in the most, for the most part, when we're gathering, it's not a life or death situation. Um, uh, but yeah, I think that's one major difference between how we go after things, basically.
hmm What parts do you think align with the what we have today?
I think the veneration of the gods specifically, and the fact that now I believe that the main heathen community out there, um, they know way more about all of the gods than what people in this country ever did. Way beyond Freya, Odin, and Thor. Everybody's, uh, I think, digging way deeper into the knowledge. Um, so I think that is similar. Um, the difference being that in those times you would have grown up with that. You would have had discussions with that in your home. For most of us, we learned that later in life. Being an older person like I am, I remember the days when you could not. There were not books about heathenry. I remember those days.
Hmm.
So um, I think that passing of knowledge and the depth of knowledge and things that are out there is very similar, although we're receiving that differently. I think in the past, it was an elder in the community that had these discussions, or a Gothai or Githyan or something like that, or a traveling sage that did these things and talked about the gods, or maybe even Odin himself.
Hmm.
Well,
Absolutely.
there is that one aspect. Trying to remember which one it is where it says that. Oh, Lodfofnisbot, in the Havamo. Um, there's I think it's Danish, where it says that a guy came, stood in a hall, spoke these words, and said, "These are the words that Odin spoke to me, and his name is Lodfofnir." And it kind of answers, it gives an answer to who the heck is Lodfofnir that he's talking about all this time, you
Mhm.
know? So like, yeah, and then the term Eddas, it literally means what my grandma said. So what Topher was saying about the elders talking, Snorri, heard stories told to him by his grandma, and then he wrote them down, and therefore we have the poetic Eddas. So
Mhm.
it's it's just the simplicity of that, and tying into what Topher said, the harsh reality, and something that I would like to see come back more. And I've experienced it from both of you because I've been in both of your houses, and you guys gave me a bed and gave me food. Is gestafatter, the guest right. You know, when heathens travel and you share frith with them, if since we are spread out more and we can travel farther, um, if we have the capacity, be a good host, you know,
Mhm.
um, and welcome them into your home, care for them, and then of course return the favor if they're traveling, coming
Right.
through, all that. So, that's part of the whole thing of Frith and the whole part thing of community. And that's something that, a lot of people, they just get a hotel, when you travel. Um, and if you don't have room, well, they camp or like if I have a large gathering and a bunch of people are coming, my house isn't big enough to hold 15 people. I, unless you all want to pile up on the floor or something because I don't have enough room. But, you know, I mean, I do have plenty of areas in the summer. If you have a tent, toss it out there. You
Mhm.
got plenty of space because I have plenty of room outside. But it's, you know, um, I lost my train of thought. Got people over here
One
commenting.
one thing that you've said in the past that I want to hit on, Sanford, is when you are giving and you are being gracious with what you have, do not stretch yourself beyond what you're capable of to where it becomes a burden, because then you are not a good host to anybody. And you're
No.
doing yourself a disservice and you're doing your guests a disservice. So make sure that when you are being a host, that you are within your means to do so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We've had the 12 people that came over for a visit, but sorry, kids, we can't eat this week.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like give what you have, because with half a loaf and half a cup, I made a friend,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
you may not have, where you can roast a whole hog, and have a big party. It may just
right.
be small,
Hmm.
and just do what you can to reach out, and don't become a mooch. That's a big thing too.
Yeah. Yes.
Hmm.
It says it's better to not ask at all than to ask for too much, because then you become a burden um, to the others around
Absolutely. Any other ideas, Sanford, on what ways you see modern heathen virtues aligning or conflicting with historical Norse ethics?
you. Well, you have within historic Norse ethics, we don't have the best examples, and the examples we do have were actually written after the Viking Age. The closest that was written at the very tail end of the Viking Age is the Danelaw, and that was more a list of laws. There were societal laws listed in there. Um, but as Topher touched to, it was oral. There wasn't a written example of exactly how they lived, and it varied from location to location. So therefore, you know, you don't have a set, you know, protocol for how you would behave. And so you draw from that and you hermeneutically adapt to today's society what you can find therein and how today's society works in relation to how their society worked. You know, you can take the bringing of slaves and the bringing of hostages, and you can relate that to immigration, so on and so forth, as to how they treated those individuals that came. Um, you know, because every slave that came was given the right to citizenship. It varied from location to location. If they did what they were supposed to, learn the language, learn the culture, and attributed to the community, they were granted full citizenship. I think the longest period that existed there was like 4 years. You know, um, you can take that with the guest right, the welcoming of people into your community from outside. Generally, this was the Lord. They would have the most room, obviously. They would have their longhouse, and they would come and they could crash on the floor of the longhouse. They didn't have hotels when they came into a town that was established, and they would allow this person. And if this person wanted to set up shop, so to speak, and start a trade, they were granted that opportunity. They were very harsh to a non citizen, so to speak, who didn't follow the law. There were basically two punishments. One was instant death. They weren't given the right to court because they didn't have citizenship. They were simply executed or deported, or basically they were put in a boat with no oars and pushed out to the ocean. Well, the gods will judge you.
Yeah.
Good
Um,
luck.
People want to do that too.
yeah. Not exactly the friendliest way of getting rid of somebody, but you know, it comes to play. We want people that are good in our society that will,
Mhm.
add, but a person who's going to violate the autonomy of others, well, hasta la vista, baby, as
Yeah.
most Nick would say.
And even though, like, just to really drive this point home, even though slaves were given the right to citizenship, it doesn't make slavery right. It doesn't make it any better. Just so
No.
people are aware, we are not condoning slavery here.
No, I don't approve of that. But I'm saying that's an example of hermeneutical application,
Right. Yes.
to bringing people in as hostages or bringing people in as slaves. It added to their community. Today we have immigration instead of slavery, people moving into the country, into our areas,
Right.
and they don't have to be heathen for us to treat them right.
Exactly.
Because
Mhm.
as was spoken of briefly before, we need to respect the autonomy of all beings. And so therefore, they have the right to be and become. A lot of times when you speak of be or exist in Old Norse, you use the word viva, which is not just a state of existing. It's actually progression involved with that. It is to be or become, if you would translate it properly.
Hmm.
Yeah. You have to be contributing to that society. If you're just taking away, you're not going to become part of that society. And that, I think, goes all the way down to like kindreds in today's day and age. We all I think have been part of kindreds where there's like these hangers on that typically have nothing but negative things to say about stuff, don't participate in everything, and you know, I always that's a phrase that has always stuck in my head: is are you contributing to or taking away from this process that we're going through?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's whether you just show up and stand around and drink everybody's beer and eat the food, don't add anything, you don't want to study if you're doing a lore study.
Yeah.
What's the point, guy? I mean,
Right.
why are you? We're
Just
here to
roll
grow
or
and to
what?
learn. Um,
I'm here because I heard there was punch and pie.
tasty.
Yeah.
Everybody likes free food.
Yeah. Colby makes a comment of not being a mooch reminds him of better to not offer than to offer too much, which actually goes into the next question I have for you guys. So, what role does reciprocity, Gabo, play in the relationships between heathens, the gods, and the land? How are we giving back what we're taking in and taking in what we're or should be giving out? So, Sanford, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, Colby already started, and it was actually talking about this a little bit center. I have in my notes, I'm minded of Havamal 145, where it states, it is better to refrain from asking aid than to request more than
Be
you
right
need.
back.
All right.
Payment is required for every gift. It is better to refrain from helping than to overextend yourself. Moderation. Um, you need to know what you can do and what you can't, and do what you can. Don't
Mhm.
hurt yourself. If Bob comes around and is like, "Hey, I need fucking X amount of dollars because otherwise my electric's going to get cut off." Don't pay his electric bill and then get yours cut off in turn. Um,
Mhm.
it's redundant. So if I can't afford to help someone and I see someone posting a thing saying, "Do I need help?" I don't say anything. You know, at
Mhm.
the most, be like, "Did you check with this resource thing?" You know, give them something I can give rather than say, "Well, I can give you $50 and now I'm short $50 on my needs." So
Mhm.
if you have the $50, just give the $50. Don't bother about it. Don't ask reciprocation. Um, a lot of us are more worried about getting back than about giving. Reciprocity will come to you, and it may not be from the same source. Um, but if you are the benefactor of giving, or the beneficiary, no, sorry, not the benefactor, beneficiary of a gift, ensure that you pay it forward at the very least. Pass it on to the next person that comes along who is in need when you can. Um,
Mhm.
I would say most people have their rocky spots, where things are tight, things are tough. You lose your job, get laid off, whatever, and now you're pinching pennies, and Abraham Lincoln's squirming because you're pinching them so hard. And you're concerned because you're like, yeah, I got about a month and a half, and my lights are going to get turned off if I don't have an income again. I've been there. A lot of people have. Most people are. And not very many of us are, multimillionaires who can handle the situation. And if you think about reciprocity in the long run, okay, and about caring for others and paying forward, consider that every individual that exists, every person that lives on this planet, myself, Topher, Mac, every one of us was in a place where we depended on another for survival.
Mhm.
Every one of us was born helpless. And if it wouldn't have been for the good graces of our parents, we would have died because we couldn't feed ourselves. We couldn't even change our clothes. We could barely move. And they took care of us. So every one of us that exists owes it forward.
Yeah, it's not necessarily just a heathen concept, but I think for me personally, just the belief of, you get back what you put out. So if you're only putting out negativity, that's all you're going to get back. And I think that concept fits into this pretty well. That, if you've got guests over and you maybe feeding them as your gift to them or something like that. But yeah, it's almost become natural to me. I've done it for so long, and like, you come to my house, you're leaving with something.
Right.
I, and it just almost comes natural at this point. I don't even really think about it too much. And like, Sanford's coming, I'm like, oh, he'll like this. I'll make sure I get him this. He brings every time he comes, he brings me my favorite thing from Wisconsin. Uh, his brings me some. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of it now. Sanford, you have to help me out. Thank you.
Landjäger.
I was gonna say cheese curds.
Yeah.
Squeaky cheese.
Just a dried meat like sausage thing, and they are so freaking good. But yeah.
I found a new brand up north. I was up north yesterday and I stopped at this little mom and pop place because I needed to use the restroom. And I saw these Landjägers. They were naturally
Ooh,
cased
wow.
and they were amazing. There was this perfect
Yeah.
pop, and then it was just tender inside. And they had seasoned the inside meat with garlic,
Mm.
Well, you
and I love
can't
garlic.
flaunt that in front of
Yeah,
Topher now and not send him some. I
I
mean,
mean,
come on.
this is. I'm sorry he brought up Landjäger, and I'm like, I had some yesterday. It was exquisite. Yes. Yes.
How does the reciprocity fit in with the gods and with the land, um, as far as heathens are concerned in our concept?
I think it's more of like a giving thanks almost is really what it comes down to. I thank the land vater on our property constantly. I've got a small little offering area uh, that I leave offerings out, and I thank them for protecting our land and keeping evil away and things like that. It's really just a way of saying thanks. I think as well.
Mhm.
Always offer and give something when asking from the gods. They're not our benefactors. All right. A lot of us have the Christian concept that, the gods are our redeemer and our savior, and we go to them when we have a hard time. But they help us do, okay, for ourselves more than just do stuff for
Mhm.
us. And I think of one time, this is back 5, 6 years ago, and I had a windstorm and a branch fell off a maple tree. I went out with a chainsaw, chopped it up, stuck it on the wood pile, gave it no thought. I was just cleaning up the mess. And then I went to light my wood stove, and for about 3 or 4 days, I could not get a good fire going in my wood stove. It would not burn for crap. Nothing, not even the dried out, well seasoned wood would burn. And I'm like, I didn't even thank the tree spirits for that wood that they gave me from that storm. And so I went out and I did an offering. And after that, no problem. It just burned like it was supposed to. Um, you know, and they have those ways of letting us know that, hey, you need to say thanks. And so, consider, their purpose and their intent and respect
Mhm.
it. The Landvetter were here a lot longer than we ever were, and before anybody else ever existed in this landscape.
Hmm.
You know, they are pure energy that is associated with the land, the tree itself, essence, so to speak, or the
Hmm.
rocks. And so you show it respect and you give it thanks for what it does for you, whether it's giving shade, giving firewood, whether it's providing the nutrients for your vegetable patch to grow. Um, you give thanks to it.
Hmm.
And with the gods, that's why we bloat, is to gain their favor, so that their intent hopefully aligns with ours in our endeavors and our goals.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, and don't be going out and picking up just random cool rocks without asking permission and thanking
I know.
nature for it, or you'll pay.
Well,
When a couple of points I want to hit on, and Sanford and Topher, both of you made some great observations. I know when I like make runes, I do it as a little side hustle. I always honor the Landvitter because I'm taking an essence from the tree and I'm creating something new with it. I'm combining my essence with the essence of the spirit that already exists. And so you give thanks for that. I always include, um, some rosemary or some type of herb or something in when I send them out. And I thank the plant that I'm sending the land vitir of the plant because I'm taking from that energy, creating something new and giving it to somebody else. And that transfers that energy, the spirit, it transfers from one person to the next in everything that we do. Another point that you hit on, is the whole benefactor issue. And on my altar, I know you can't see it from here, but it says I always have that constant reminder to empower. I ask the gods to empower me to do what I can do. Not asking them to do things for me, but I ask to be empowered so that I take responsibility, that I can perform the actions myself. I'm not walking behind the gods, I'm walking next to the gods. So, those are great points that you guys have made, and they really are resonating with me. So, loving it. Um, yeah, so how do you approach ancestor veneration in a modern world where people may have complicated or distant relationships with their lineage? Um, and or maybe even people that shouldn't be venerated in their lineage. Topher, I'll let you take the lead on this one.
All right. Well, this one kind of hits home with me because I have. There are a lot of members of my family that I do not associate with, for various reasons. Most of all are revolving around their inability to stay unlocked up. Um, so I try to stay away from those types as much as possible. Um, but when it comes to, like, early on in my heathenry, I struggled with thinking that I was going against the beliefs of my ancestors. And that's because when I trace my lineage back, it goes back to Celts. So in both Britain, Ireland, like that. So as many know, I started out my uh, pagan practices more with something similar to Druid slash Wiccan work and things like that, that was more based around the Celtic belief system. And I still follow the god Cernunnos. Um, but um, wait, what was my point?
You were betraying your ancestors.
Oh yeah, thank you.
You betrayed them.
Whoa, went right off that track there for a second. So yeah, I struggled with: am I going against the beliefs and things of my ancestors? Because I don't know for a fact, but I truly feel that at some point back in my lineage there was like a druid that a member of our family. Um, he's came to me and during meditations before, and I had the opportunity to ask the question: am I angering my ancestors by following a Norse path? Because I know they probably were some of them that fought against Vikings, during all of the Viking visits to Great Britain and such areas. But I got a pretty clear response that um, it's not about what your exact belief is. It's about the kind of person that you are, the kind of things that you're trying to do. If you're doing good, that's what we expect of you.
Hmm.
So, um, so that was something that I struggled with early on. Came to believe that, or uh, accept that. But I think that it's something that I try to do in nearly every ritual, every blow that I do is venerate uh, the ancestors, because obviously none of us would be here without them,
Hmm.
regardless of the fact of whether they have the same belief system or anything like that. They are our blood, and therefore they should be honored as such. Um, I don't think it has to be a large part of every ritual. Um, just thanking the ancestors. Uh, and of course, we do have specific rituals in which we do venerate them throughout the year with like Dieser Bloat and things like that, where we honor the female leaders of our bloodline. But yeah, I think it's important. I understand in today's day and age, there's people in your direct living family that many of us probably don't want to spend time with. I have, exited from many of my family members just simply because, I'm not going to allow their negativity to drag them down. If they want to talk to me about things and straightening their life up, hey, I'm here. But if they're going to continue down the path that they're going, I'm not going to, you know, get messed up in that. I'm not going to let that shit drag me down.
Hmm.
If it does not serve me, I shall not have it as part.
Yeah,
Don't let them hold
That's
you back.
right.
yeah.
Indeed. I mean, I would say that, feeding into that, you know, the best way to honor your ancestors, regardless of their difference in belief structures or having a different faith. Most people, you just understand that most people are just trying to do right, you know, even though they may be misguided as we see it or may not have the full reality that we see.
Hmm.
They're trying to live right. And so, therefore, living right as we know it is honoring them, regardless if our path is different than them on a religious level. And you can look at it, to respect them and who they were. We carry them in two ways. We carry them, first of all, in our DNA. So take care of our bodies, you know, um, because our physical health relates to how we care for what they gave us physically,
Hmm.
which is our genetic traits, so on and so forth. And mitochondrial DNA is one of my favorite new things in science, which I'm not a scientist, so I don't know a heck of a lot about it. It's one of my favorites because it's one of the things that's passed on through the females. Okay. And it doesn't change at all. And it's what archaeologists and anthropologists use to trace migrations because it doesn't change. It does not alter a whit. Um, and so that's really cool. I mean,
Hmm.
my kids don't have my mitochondrial DNA because it stops with me from my mom, but they have their mothers, and that carries on. So, and then the other way, that was a tangent, me getting excited about something. The other way is through your humming. Okay. So your Hamiya is inheritance, the inherited fate and luck that you gain on a spiritual and cognitive level from your
Hmm.
ancestors. And that is part of the new shelf or the part of the self. So it's actually within you. You've earned and inherited just like DNA. It's, say, for example, your spiritual DNA that you've inherited from your ancestors and from those who've carried your energy before you. Um, and so, therefore, to live honorably and to live right and to take care of your spiritual and cognitive well being, as well as your physical well being, this honors them, you know? So, everything we do affects the cosmere,
Hmm.
and we can say, well, my parents, my ancestors may have done wrong. Well, was it rectified?
Hmm.
Well, you carry forward their spiritual energy. And so, therefore, it is your job for your own spiritual well being to rectify the mistakes made by others that haven't already been taken care of.
Hmm.
Therefore, you can pass on to your children a clean spiritual energy that has had the Vergilde paid.
I never thought about that. I have work to do. Ayla makes some great points in the comments. I just want to touch on. She says, "I think the best way to honor our ancestors is to become a good one," and that's so true. What we do in this life is going to echo, beyond us, and the only thing we can leave behind is our reputation. When all is said and done.
Mhm.
And she says, also think about,
Cattle die.
yeah, exactly. Cattle die, kinsmen die, but the reputation of the man is what endures. She also says, also think about that in relation to our ancestors' practice of holding the Disir in an honored place. So,
The mothers.
hmm.
Yes, the sacred mothers. So
Hmm.
yeah. I think that directly aligns with mitochondrial
Absolutely.
DNA itself.
Yeah.
Pass that along. So
Hmm.
your ether, they are in you.
Hmm. I always say that Norse heathenry, also true. It's such like a scientific faith, you know, so many things that explains just relate to how the world works around us, and this is just another example of that. I love it.
Try not to be science deniers like some.
Well,
The earth is flat.
the thing about it is we're talking about core heathen concepts earlier. And one of them, I think, personally myself, is that the pursuit of knowledge and to turn that knowledge into wisdom. That is just a running theme in the lore. And the more knowledge we acquire, the more wisdom we will have. And we are responsible to act on that knowledge, not deny it. And that I think is a core heathen concept. I think people get into heathenry at a certain point where they feel comfortable with what they have, and that's all they want because it justifies their narrative, and they stop there. And no, it's not supposed to be a completely comfortable ride. There's work to put into it, and to me, that's one of the core concepts that I hold on to personally myself.
One of the things I love most about heathenry is I'm constantly learning new things, even,
Hmm.
30 plus years into my journey. There's
Hmm.
still new things found. And going back to the, uh, not being afraid of science, I mean, archaeology is finding new stuff about, the Norse every day.
Hmm.
And um, so I think it's silly to even think about not paying attention to those things.
Hmm. That's one thing.
The one who sits on his knowledge will soon become
Yeah.
Mm,
stagnant, as Odin says in the lore.
that is so true, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing these shows. Is I learned, I've been doing this I've been heathen for years and years and years, and every time someone comes on, I learn something new concepts, new ideas. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I didn't even think about that. Am I stuck in a rut of a certain way of thinking? I need to expand my mind. So every time I do one of these, I just learn so much.
That's why it's important to have diversity in our religion.
Hmm, absolutely.
Indeed.
And say that word out loud. Diversity.
Hey, inclusiveness.
Yes. Totally agree. Ah,
Well, the more diverse and the more cultures, like the Havamal says, just listen, one cannot truly know wisdom unless they are widely
mm,
traveled, which means, they've gained insights from multiple concepts and multiple cultural applications. You know, today in America, where it's the melting pot, you know, you don't have to travel as far to be introduced to cultures. I mean, if you're in New York City, you travel 2 blocks and you're in a totally different country. You know, it's amazing. If you want to visit the world, just walk through
Yeah.
Brooklyn, okay? Because you're gonna go from the Arab sector to the Turkish sector to the Jewish sector, then you're gonna be moving on to visit Ukraine.
right.
It's just like that. And you gain so much more insight. And I would say also make sure you go to one third world country,
Mm,
okay? Because I went to Romania when I was younger, and it's not totally third world, but back in the mountains, uh, I'm trying to Brishtin, Romania. Back in the mountains, the way of life was so different, and the thing those people took joy in.
mm,
I'm like, how? Their life, they were singing. These people would sing when they did stuff. They were just happy people. They didn't have the outside bull crap that we see
mm,
in their lives, and it changed my perspective seeing how those people think.
mhm.
I would encourage one person just go out there. I mean, you didn't have cell service up there. Your phone didn't work. It was you were just in the moment with these
Well,
people.
I'm not going then. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. No, but you make a very valid point, and I think traveling exposes you to cultures, and not just cultures, but a way of thinking, a different way of life. And you know, the, the United States has this, you know, uh, ingrained in us this capitalistic, point of view of everything, and everything's instant and it should be easy. And you go to other places and it's like so different. There, so many cultures are just tied to the earth and not tied to their phones, and how they interact with each other and the earth. Someone in the comments, I think it was Brandon, had mentioned, the uh, the way mushrooms interact with each other. And it's like that. There's this web that we're all tied to, and some people recognize that and they dig into that, and a lot of times it's common here in the United States to be disassociated and be distant, and it's easier to you know to just sit behind a computer and there's your life. you know so get out,
Well,
explore.
you could consider mycelium. I think that's what
Yeah.
is in mushrooms that makes them. Yeah, mycelium, that's Megan. This Megan flows from Yggdrasil through Yggdrasil and through every living
Hmm.
being that exists. Cycling around to fall again into the web of Erd. So I mean, that's our intercommunication.
Yeah.
You have your personal Megan pool, which is you, and then you have the cosmic Megan pool, and you're interconnected. And so all of us have that connection with each other if we just open ourselves up to find it.
Hmm. I'm big on mycelium and mushrooms. That's a whole other topic for another time, though. That's a whole other
That's
show.
something to discuss in person with you, Mac.
Yes. Uh, I think I think there's a bloat we're gonna have that's gonna. I'll be visiting you very soon. So we
Oh boy.
covered core heathen concepts. Let's talk about what we bring forward from the past. And I know there's going to be some difficult stuff in here, but I want to talk about it. especially when we get to the part where it's what we should leave behind. But let's talk about what we bring forward from the past. So, what elements of historical Norse religion and culture do you think are most relevant to modern heathens? Um, Sanford, do you want to take the lead on this one?
The tragedy of humanity is that humanity does not know themselves. We've lost connection with the land, and therefore we've lost connection with ourselves. The tragedy of industry, so to speak. As our friends in the White House like to say, innovation. All right. The neo-shelfer. It's one of my favorite topics. All right. It is one of the most prevalent aspects that is not done today. An understanding of self is the basis of understanding one's circumstances and how they relate to the nine realm system. To quote Sun Tzu, he stated, if one does not know themselves, they will succumb in every battle. And if we don't know every aspect of ourself, we will not fully succeed. You can set boundaries by knowing yourself. You know your limitations by knowing yourself, and you gain connection with others and with the cosmere as a whole by knowing yourself. You also can figure out identity issues where you struggle with your own identity by understanding the aspects of yourself. I could go into detail about all that stuff. Okay? But that would take too long. But that is one of the sole things that needs to come back is understanding the understanding of self, and not just the physical and a tiny bit of the cognitive, but the full aspect of the cognitive and the spiritual as well. Because knowing yourself, without knowing yourself, you can't truly know everything else.
And that requires work, and it requires facing uncomfortable truths about yourself. And I think that's why a lot of people don't invest in that. You know, it's hard. It's work.
Yeah.
So good point, Sanford. Well said, by the way. And that's something I'm working on too.
I think it's a lifelong process
Yeah.
to fully understand. Because some of these things, like humming, for example, they extend into your past.
hmm
And then, and then some of them are lost aspects. Colby was talking about it, I think, last time with soul reclamation. And I call that refining your field gear. The concept stands, it's not agreed with by all, that a field gear is an aspect or a fragment of your energy that broke off between lives. And you can reclaim that and therefore reclaim some of your energy and memory from the past.
Sorry, I'm moving rooms.
I know, that's fine.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to Meet the Midgard.
Oh, hi, thank you.
Surprise guest.
Yeah. Stole the show.
She just got back from being the postmistress here in town, so I'm moving rooms for her.
Cool.
Hi,
Yeah, your point on Ophelia is, I think, spot on. You know, it's a part of the reclaiming a past of a part of us in the past, which is part of the work we have to do to ourselves to fully experience life in the present. So I absolutely agree. Topher, what elements of historical Norse religion and culture do you think are most relevant to modern heathens?
I think a lot of the concepts that we've talked about already are very important. With honor, truth, and frith, and all that are super important. And I think once you start digging a little deeper into the different, knowledge that is out there. Um, well, I'll just give you an example. First time I read the Have 'Em All, which, we're going back more than a decade at this point, I was like, what the hell is this? It's just telling me how to sit in a room and things like that. It seems so basic and just like normal everyday things that a person would do. But then you start reading a little bit deeper into it and reading between the lines a little bit, and you see that it tells you how not only to be a good person, how to be cautious, how to basically how to live your life as a good person and a heathen. But at first glance, like I said, I was like, this is silly. I don't understand, why is this telling me to keep a sword at my back. I don't carry a sword anymore. But
Right.
once you think about what's that actually telling you, is it's telling you to be cautious and when you go into a room and to be wary of someone who spends too much time there, or that takes too much, or even gives too much. So I think it's just those concepts like that really help build a foundation for modern day heathenry.
hmm I agree. We've got some great comments in the comment section as well. Brandon made a point that sometimes one must give themselves over to themselves to see clearly. And Colby kind of followed that up with the example of Othin himself, 9 nights he hung, offering himself to himself. Going back to one of Sanford's points. And then for just touching on what you just said, Topher, there are the things that we had discussed earlier previously, staples, things that lay a foundation. And without that, you're only going to go so far. You're only going to go so deep, and it stops. And you're not going to have the full experience of what it means to be heathen, or that full experience with the gods, that full experience with the Landvetter. You're doing a disservice to yourself in that aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Back to basics and build from the ground
Yeah.
up in your life.
hmm
Um, and you got to tear out the rubble before you can
hmm
build. So get rid of the crap and the clutter
Yeah.
that's there. You're going to have to, if you're coming from, I came from a Mennonite background, a lot of ideas that I had to totally remove from my head
hmm
before I could progress. And so, with doing that, you know, that takes work, it takes time,
hmm
you know. And I would say, if you see a person that's new and is going through learning these things, they may display for a while, they may display a bit of bitterness toward their old religion and
hmm
faith. Give them that time. That's part of healing.
Right.
Um, you know, don't sit there and talk shit with them, but allow them the grace to grow because growth takes time.
hmm And on that thought, and I know I bring this up in every episode, but a lot of people who have converted from Christianity and going back to their roots in heathenry often fall into these pitfalls of replacing, just keeping the same order and replacing certain things. Othin is God, Baldur's Jesus, Loki's the devil. You know, the concept of sin is still in their head, and sin does not exist for us. You know, it's it takes a deprogramming. It takes a lot of deprogramming, rethinking. And like you said, you have to just clear out the rubble, destroy everything, and build up again. And that is going to be just a shameless plug here. That is going to be a series that we will be working on. I will be working on with the both of you and also some other guests as well coming up. So it's not just for new heathens, but it also might be for heathens that have been on the path a long time that probably are stuck in a rut and need a bit of a refresher or something. So look for that coming out next month, which will be very exciting. So, but yeah, well said. Those are definitely concepts and things to keep in mind as you move forward in your own path and your own journey. So, how should modern heathens balance historical accuracy with personal spiritual experience?
Well, that's a Pandora's box.
It is.
Um,
Because you have a lot of brostatrues out there.
yeah, I think it's important, as we've talked about in here, that knowledge and gaining knowledge is super important with our religion, and I think that trying to get as many sources as you can that are true sources from historical events, not just somebody's UPG. But I think being able to use the historical knowledge along with your own personal actions, how you connect with the gods and the Landvater and all of that. I've always been a big proponent of it all being about intent. I still believe that, and I think that's very it fits into this concept as well. Is I think we have to pay attention to any historical sources that we can, but I also believe that as long as your intent and your idea and concepts are pure and clear, that adding in a little bit of what works for you is okay. Yeah, definitely don't want to slip into brosatru plans, but yeah, I think that's you definitely have to pay attention to what we know from the past, but yeah, you have to make it work for you as well. As one, I can tell you, it's slightly off subject, but one of the things that led me away from Druid work and Wiccan was because they sang so much
Huh.
in rituals, and then I didn't like that. It was just my personal feelings about it, and mainly it was because most of the songs were so silly. But I didn't care too much for that. That is kind of one of the main reasons why I started looking, way back when, because that part of the current belief system just didn't fit with me. And I love singing, but singing about the flowers and the trees. No.
Well, you're gonna hate what comes next. No, just kidding. So you did touch on something, intent, and I cannot stress this enough. And that is such a big thing for me. Intent, intent, intent. Going into your life every day, every morning with intent. Every morning, my own personal practice, I get up, I take a shower, and then I sit and I meditate I try to get in like good. It takes about half hour for the whole process, but I get about 15 minutes of meditation in, and then I set my intent and I cast my runes, and then it's another hour of studying them and reading them and feeling it. So I'm making sure that I'm thorough with it, but everything is set into motion by the intent that I'm putting in there. And I'm so big on that. That is such a big thing. It really is.
Absolutely.
Mm. And the same question goes to you, Sanford. How should modern heathens balance historical accuracy with personal spiritual experience?
Well, I want to ask the question in response.
Oh.
How much of the historical stuff do we have that we have is
Mm.
UPG? Because the Eddas were what my grandma said, and it was an oral tradition. And then you have to take into account spatial and temporal distortion. If you read stories that come from Denmark, they're not the same as the ones from Norway and
Mhm.
Sweden. If you take the Nibelungenlied and you compare it to the Eddas, there's portions that are in there and they have different names and cultures. So what's historically accurate? The stories don't all line up, you know? And I think it goes with what Topher was saying about intent. It's their personal path. Are we trying to live true to the path that we're following?
Mm.
You may be hermeneutically incorrect at times. You may not know of the latest discovery that has been found in archaeology. But as it is, it's right for you right now.
Mhm.
And it's going to grow, it's going to change, and it's going to develop into more, and it's going to connect. As your understanding, as your knowledge increases, your path will evolve. You don't look at the world the same way now as you did when you were
Mm.
10. And it changed when you were 15. And then it changed again by the time you were in your young adulthood. And it continues to change. Why? Because you're developing, you're becoming. It goes back to Verda. It's not just you exist, you are becoming daily.
Mm.
And so, yes, historical accuracy is right. And I even mentioned how, if I have an experience with a deity and Utaseta, I turn around and I go back and I look at the lore. You talked about it with what you do with runes. You gather your intent and you have your prescient understanding, but then you go back and you check, okay, what's the historical references as to what these runes mean?
Mhm.
This is a faith of homework, which means that you check everything you do and then you double check it. And then you hear a new perspective and you go back and check it all again. It's consistent, it's continuous. And so, yes, your UPG is valid. Your perception is valid because it's how you perceive these things to be. There's no map to the esoteric
Mm.
worlds,
Mm.
it doesn't exist. So, what you perceive, you and I may take the same trip. We may see different things because of where we are in our cognitive and spiritual life,
Mhm.
because the message for us is different and it's meant to be that way.
Mm.
And that's why we sit down and we say, okay, so Topher may not agree with me on this, but you know what? Topher, shit's fully valid. It's fully right. Okay? I won't take that from everybody, honestly. I just trust and respect the Topher. Some guys will be like, that guy's, I'm not even going to talk to him no more. But, the whole thing is, it's valid, and it's valid for them as it is that moment.
Mhm.
And it may change tomorrow. Topher may read something in regards to what we're talking about. He may read something tonight and say, oh, my perspective has shifted.
Mhm.
That happened
Okay?
multiple
That's
times
how it
with
is.
me. That's a very good point, Sanford's. You learn something new, and suddenly the text to your bloat changes. That
Yeah.
Yep.
that type of thing has happened multiple times with me.
It has, the same here. Especially doing this show, man, it has altered my path and my way of thinking so many times. Every time I do it, something new is popping up, and I'm like, oh man, I need to incorporate that. I didn't think of that before. And it shifts. It helps me grow, and it's important. It's important to keep that going. Well
Yeah, you're
said.
growing, you're dying, right?
Yeah, no.
Exactly. If you don't progress, you regress. You only stand still for so long.
Mhm. Um, Stanford, let you take the lead on this one. Do you see a difference between reconstructing ancient practices and evolving heathenry for today?
Well, we've already established the fact that Ancient practice was about growth, development, and becoming more,
Mhm.
you know? So evolving and fitting your faith to your circumstance, okay, is what they did. You know, if you look at the culture and that they lived in at that time, their rituals coincided with what they did. They went by the season. There was an agricultural
Mhm.
society, and so therefore they paid attention. You know, you have the deities that are involved with planting, and those with cultivation, and then those with frickin' harvest, so on and so forth. The aspects of agriculture.
Mhm.
You have deities that pertain to the winter and to the elements that they cannot control that can wreak havoc. And they would seek to appease these individuals in their lives. And so you can hermeneutically adapt those to pretty much any type of occupation or reality you live in because they're versatile. And that's why you need to study the history, study the culture, and understand it so that you can accurately, not just based on your UPG, even though that's important, apply it to modern day. So people look at Njord, for example. Okay, he was the god of industry. He was the god of transportation. He was the god of the sea and the harbors. Well, what does that relate to today? If you're a truck driver, Njord's your guy
Mm.
because Njord dealt with logistics. Okay, that's what he dealt with. And his, like, if you take the etymology of his name, you put the N in front of Jord.
Mm.
It means guardian of the earth. So if you're a warrior or the Coast Guard, that's your guy. He protects the shore. Okay. And you can take those things throughout with the kennings that exist of our gods. And you can use those kennings to apply these deities to modern aspects of life.
Mhm. Kennings.
That's
I just want to hit really quickly. Kennings are important. It's easy to gloss over something. If you'd like, let's say you read the phrase whale song, but you don't know anything about it. You just gloss over it. No, go study it. It's a path, that uh, uh, it literally symbolizes a path that leads you to another place in the water. Understand the kennings when you're reading it. Stop right where you are, look it up, understand it, because your experience is going to be richer and you're going to understand everything more. It's easy it, to take something from another culture if we're looking at the Eddas and such, and there are intricacies in there that are being missed because we're not stopping to understand the kenning. So I think it's important to do that work and to study it. So sorry, I just wanted to pop that in there really quick.
yeah, you don't just know the historic,
Mhm.
circumstance. You also need to know your circumstance and able to properly apply the transition. Viking culture was rough. Topher talked about that earlier. And one way they would freaking deal with slight, okay, was they would rape a dude. So if you know a guy was talking smack about you know me, I would go rape him to humiliate him. They did it a lot to Christians once they found out that Christians thought it was a sin. Um, you know, I mean, but we can't go do that. I mean, we're not going to go
Wait, what?
raping people because that's not okay. No, it's not okay in today's society. In that society, that was acceptable back then. Okay. Um, Today, it's not as done. And so, if you take autonomy into account with that, we have laws that deal with that individual that did wrong. You know what I mean? To us, if he harmed us or injured us, we file a report. He goes to jail. He does his time. He pays his price. You know, and so if you take into account the autonomy of a spatial culture, that was the way you dealt with a guy that did something like that to you, and now there's a new way of doing it. And when you violate the autonomy of anything, and so the autonomy of a nation is its laws.
Mhm.
It's specified by its laws. So the United States Constitution is the core of the autonomy of the United States of America. And if you violate that, you violate the autonomy of a nation, and so therefore every citizen in America, you have violated their autonomy.
Mhm.
And according to Nordic culture, if you violated autonomy, you didn't exist anymore per problem 127. Okay? Therefore, you have no autonomous right. That way, they wouldn't have looked at raping that dude as a violation of his autonomy. The same as we remove the freedom in today's society from a person who does that and throw them in jail. They don't have the autonomous right to freedom anymore because they violated the autonomy of every person in America
Mhm.
because they broke our laws. That's kind of going far afield there, but I just wanted to throw that in there,
Mhm.
you know. And I'll let Topher comment.
Yeah. Topher. So yeah, how should modern heathens balance? Or I'm sorry, do you see a difference between reconstructing ancient practices and evolving heathenry for today?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I think we need to use as much historical data as we can as the basis for what we're trying to do. But a lot of it is just quite simply not transferable to our current lives. So just like the things you talk, I don't like that guy. I can't just go over there and rape him until he loves me. I can't.
Right.
He just might love you after you're
I
done
know,
with that.
Oh, yeah. I think it's important, and I don't think it's really that different. As long as you're following basic concepts and not just bastardizing things from other religions. Actually, it's been a long time ago, but I remember somebody brought up that they thought that heathenry should have like the Christ wafers
Mm.
that we could pass around at a bloat. And I was like, first of all, we don't eat of Odin's flesh. So no.
you.
Yeah. So yeah, as long as you're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, I think you're fine.
Yeah. I would ensure that if you're going to incorporate other faiths into your faith, all right, I believe that anyone is welcome to any faith. However, a lot of people, they don't want someone to do that. So you gain the consent of someone. Don't go claiming that this is a legitimate practice from another culture without first gaining insight from someone who actually that is their practice. Gain permission before utilizing in public certain rites. I incorporate some Native American ritual into some of my personal practice. I've gained permission from their leadership to do that. However, they are not okay with me going out and using it in public practice because I haven't done the proper, I haven't gone to the training to be one of their spiritual leaders. And so therefore I am not authorized to do that. So gain authorization before you publicly display a practice and name it as such. Okay. A lot of people want to go and dub themselves this or that to sound important because they want to feel important, I guess. But earn it. Take the time, I'm willing to teach a lot of people, but there are certain aspects of my practice, especially when it goes into esotericism. I am not going to just teach anyone. I'm not going to give that information to someone because some of it has a lot of power. And if they haven't done the prerequisites, so to speak, prior, it could destroy them. And I'm not going to do that to them. Because if I give them that information and they use it to destroy themselves, then I bear a responsibility because I gave them something they weren't ready for.
That's well said. Yeah. Know where you stand, and know where someone else stands before just diving into that and taking that. So, yeah, absolutely.
Sandra, find enough Native Americans that would be willing to tie you to a tree out in the desert for a while. So
I'm good. I don't have a desire to become a medicine man or anything of that nature. I just felt that some of the practices they did that I liked, we didn't have in mine. And so I tried to incorporate that. However, before I would go and hold a ritual like that with you guys and with other people, I would gain their consent.
Yeah.
Um, I indeed gained the consent of the people who told me how to do this practice for myself, obviously, or they wouldn't have told me how to do that. But I don't have the permission to do those practices, you know,
Yeah.
in public. And so I want to show, respect to them, and I won't teach anyone those things because of my respect for those people and their culture.
Um,
And
being part Native American, I will tie you to a tree, Sanford.
listen here, I respect Odin, but I don't want to sacrifice myself unto back.
You're lost. You're missing out. Wow, you guys have some really good points. I'm like just soaking this in. It's a lot to take in. Um, absolutely. There are some comments going on. I think it's taking its own life right now. um, so I just want to kind of jump into the comments and hit on it, and maybe you guys can jump in. Uh, you know, there was a comment earlier. Cody had said, let me find it here. He says, I feel like Norse heathen reapplies to more to people with a warrior lifestyle, or at least somewhat of a warrior mentality, as opposed to other types of paganism. Um, I want to just kind of hit on that really quick. And a lot of great information is going into the comments, going back and forth. As far as like the warrior mentality, we have to understand culturally back then, even prior to the Viking Age, everyone had to defend themselves. Like you had a farm, you had to defend it. That was innate. It was part of that culture. It was a daily life for them. You defended against predators. You defended against other people that wanted your land. That was normal. That's not something that we face today, so to speak. We might face it in certain ways, but definitely not the way it was in ancient times. And then came along the whole Viking thing. But even along with the Vikings, Ayla made a point. Like you're raiding 10% of the time, 90% of the time you're back at home farming. But that's not to say that warriors or that mentality wasn't glorified. Having the reputation of a valiant and just strong warrior was honored. Was looked up to, and that is an idea that I really think borders on a line in modern heathenry between brosatru and living a truly authentic heathen life. And it's easy to glorify the warrior lifestyle. But if that inspires you and you draw from that and it fuels your path further, then use that, but don't expect everyone to have that same uh, fire that you have about the warrior aspect of it. And you can take that portion of it. Like Cody, I know is an MMA fighter, and like for him, that is a fuel for his path, and that's a mentality that I think will go and will stick with him. Um, but for someone like me who's not an MMA fighter, I work in conservation. I'm not going to take my axe and go slaughter people that are trespassing onto protected areas. It's different for me, but that's not to say that it's any less valid. But I do really believe that it is a fine line between diving into a set stereotype as compared to having an authentic experience.
Well, I think Asatru is a religion that lends itself to attract, like, well, myself, for example, being a veteran, Sanford being a veteran, it attracts people that have in been a warrior. I think, and I think that's why we've got so many uh, Asatru folks that are veterans or active duty and things like that. I think it does lend itself to that. And I think, for people that are searching for a religion that fits them, if you're a soldier or a Marine or sailor or whatever, I think it's an easy religion to slide into because I think a lot of it makes sense to those that have spent time in service.
Yeah.
I would take into account that, Miyamoto Musashi said it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Mm.
And it goes with what Odin says in Havamal, being ready, know how to prepare. Um, he speaks of carrying your weapons of war and not to leave home without protection. Um, those concepts exist, and that's a warrior mentality. Situational awareness is spoken of right away when you enter the Havamal within the first couple verses. It says, look cautiously around and with extreme prejudice, which is something you're taught in the military. And if you're in mount operations, you definitely have to be situationally aware, and you have to have extreme prejudice when you look into a room and you enter and you're clearing houses. It's a warrior mentality in that concept that's held through, and you use that. But then I think of this also, all right, within the warrior mentality. Odysseus stated, and that would be in the Iliad, he stated, "It is the warrior who most longs for peace, for he knows the cost of war." And you get to that point where every warrior wants peace. And so, where within the lore and within this war mindset that a lot of people want to put on Asatru, do we find the peace? So, where is the peace? Where is that balance that comes within it? Yes, we must be ready for war, but do we desire it? Do we long for it? I see a lot of young men that they think war is glorious and wonderful, and then I think of what in the same book in the Iliad, okay, where Hector tells Paris, he's like, "Oh, you think that's glorious to die in battle?" Okay, I have seen men die in battle, and there's nothing glorious about it. And I've seen men die in battle, and it's not glorious. It's not pretty at all. You want to see a guy shit himself? Okay, you just did, because it's going to happen. That's not very glorious.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, those great points. And I think, again, it's a fine line, and you need to really dig deep, do the homework. Don't stop on the one part of it that you like, that it's like, oh, this is a warrior's religion, I'm going to just go with that. It's much more than that.
There's so much more.
Yeah. But yes, there is definitely a warrior mentality that comes along with it.
It's the culture that existed and that Topher was talking about. You have the warrior culture that existed because of the era that they lived in and what they did and how they procured wealth and how they procured what they did. But then I like to think about too, like the Aesir, when they were at Idavold before the Great War with the Vanir. They were just happy. And that was before the corruption of wealth was brought to them from Jotunheim, where the three Jotnar women came and they told them the value of gold and what it meant, and then the Aesir began to hoard it. When before it was simply a pretty building material. It was like putting a nice stone stucco on the side of your house. That's all it was to them. It had no value. And that's the corruption of a monetary system that puts value in rare minerals and precious gems, because it gives something for them to hoard, and then it takes away from the social demographic where one guy builds, one guy farms, one guy does defense, and we all take care of each other. But now we're trying to collect more for us, and greed is introduced. And then it shows after Ragnarok, the return of the Aesir to Idavon. And it says they dusted off the tables. They went back to their roots and they began to farm because they lost all that wealth they accrued during that period when they were focused on becoming more and gaining more glory. And so war is oftentimes in today's society, what is it used for?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been made very prevalent just by recent things in the last couple of weeks. Why would we go to war? We go to war for oil. We go to war for precious minerals.
Land.
We don't go to war to liberate. We go to war to gain more wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what most wars are.
Yeah, I think
So is that really good for humanity to go to war? No, not really. You need to be ready to defend your own and defend what you have. It's the difference between being a defender and being an aggressor.
mm-hmm.
The Aesir started the war with the Vanir.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Vanir, most of the deities within the Vanir are deities associated with agriculture and with other aspects of life outside of war.
Mm-hmm.
You have Frey and Freya, and those are your gods that are associated primarily with war. And even they have aspects outside of war.
You brought up a great point when the three sisters appeared with teaching about the value of gold. The concept of greed, being introduced in such a way, it robs people. I mean, it just, it changes people. And going back to reciprocity and gift for gift, that's such a simple, easy concept to embrace and enact in your life without the influence of greed. It's a balance, and greed is far from a balance. It is the hoarding, and I think it robs people of their essence. So,
Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right?
Well said. Well said. Um, I know that this is going a little long. So we'll get through a couple more questions, and then if you guys are willing to do a part 2 for this, so that we can wrap up the rest of it, that would be great. I'm gonna let everyone, be able to get on with their days and such. But man, this was just packed with wholesome goodness. I'll go to move on to the next question: is how do we respectfully interpret and incorporate historical texts like the Poetic and Prose Edda, if you consider those historic, in our modern day practice? Topher, do you want to take the lead on that one?
Sure. I think they're important. There are certain ones that are more important than others, I believe. Some of them are just, stories about people, but some of them are, I think, parables that are trying to teach you something. I think they're probably, most of them are based off of actual occurrences, obviously. And I think you have to realize that prior to Snorri writing things down, it was an oral tradition. So, think about the telephone game. One person tells one person the line, and as it goes around, it alters. So I think that probably you have to factor that into some things. And then there's also that the fact that a lot of the Eddas comes from a somewhat Christian perspective, because Snorri was having to appease a king who was Christian. So he kind of snuck a lot of that stuff in there. In most cases, you could kind of look at it that when he's referring to specific gods, he's we're all like, yeah, I know what he's really referring to. They're talking about Odin there. So,
Yeah.
but you have to keep in mind those specific perceptions, those specific cultural beliefs, and things like that. And just as Sanford said, if you read the same thing, um, and from different cultural perspectives, whether that's Icelandic or Danish, or you could have the same story that reads differently, and so things like that you have to keep in mind. But I do think they are important um, for the modern heathen to learn. Obviously, we've talked about the Havamal a lot on here, and about Thrusismal and things like that. Very important works that everyone should know, in my opinion, when it comes to heathenry.
Mm. Well said. And you make a great point. The conquerors write write the history, so you
Yeah,
have to really, with take that lens, and even with a grain of salt, you have to just take into consideration who wrote these texts and such. And that's why it is important, as Sanford said, to go through different cultures, piece together the same stories. And I think that's one thing that's rich about all of this is there's different versions of the same story. It doesn't mean one is completely right, one is wrong. There's no absolute to it. What it is it's teaching. It's an overall message and arc that reaches that you should be looking for. And in each different variation, there could be small little things that pick up that resonate with you.
two little nuggets of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, So dig for those, look for those.
Yeah,
It's not I don't see them as contradictions as far as that, because we're not looking at these as absolute truths. It's not a Bible. We
right.
don't have a Bible. We don't have doctrine. So that's a different concept. So yeah, definitely agree with that. Well said, Topher. Well said. Sanford, same question. How do we respectfully interpret and incorporate historical texts like the Poetic and Prosetta into our modern practice?
Well, Topher already said most of what I was going to say.
Yeah.
No need to reiterate that. So yes, the understanding the culture and understanding that. And one thing you need to remember is that the philosophy of the Nordic peoples was cyclical time. And so what goes around comes around. The Sira stated in the Voluspa that the more I know of history, the more I see of the future. And that relates to cyclical time, and also, the fact that history repeats itself. You can see that in the rise and fall of empires throughout history. It happens over and over again in the same ways, the same methods. And so, to understand that culture from which it comes from, when you're reading literary works, which the Poetic and Prosetta are, you will not fully understand them unless you understand the culture. And like Topher stated, Story Sturluson, who wrote these, was a monk, a Christian scholar. And he said basically the very name is a type of to withdraw credit. These are stories my grandma told, basically saying they're wise fables, that they're not historically accurate, just within that name. And so you have to take that into mind, and then with the variants that exist from other areas of Northern Europe, you have to take that into mind. All right. So you don't go walking around saying, well, this is historical fact that this actually occurred. Okay. Until we see archaeological evidence that this actually occurred.
Right.
They can be seen as allegorical. They can be seen as advice given, the stories of the heroes and how they responded. I think of Heathen in Harvard's trying to remember, Harvard Soner. I think Helgi Harvard Soner, I think is the title of the Edda, where Heathen dealt with the circumstance. He got drunk and started boasting to his friends in his drunkenness that he was going to screw his brother's wife. not acceptable in that society, and that was something that would call for a home gun. Now, he would, but his brother was. And now he had to face his brother in a home gun. And he said, now I will die. But it is imperative that I go because I am responsible for what I said while drunk. You can
Mhm.
take that concept to today's society, and that goes to accountability. What you do, what you say. I'm sorry, you can't say, "Well, I was freaking half a fifth deep." I did. I don't even remember. You did it. Your response.
Mhm.
What you
Yeah.
do, what you say, you're responsible for. And that's the whole thing. And that's one thing that people in today's society don't like. We don't like accountability. We lash out because we're triggered, and then we're like, "Well, I was triggered." No, you're still responsible.
Mhm.
Own it. Okay, you can't help that it triggered you, but you can help how you responded to it.
Now you react.
Right. I
You
want to
know,
hit on that really quickly because this is one of the reasons, you know, I think so many people are drawn to heathenry rather than Christianity. Christianity, it's easy to just be absolved of your sins without accepting any responsibility at all. Someone else already paid this price for me. I'm good to go. See ya. I'm going to keep being a terrible person, you know? But with us, the only absolution comes from us is from us rectifying the situation ourselves, us doing the work. You know, it doesn't come from some other divine being or anything else. We put in that effort to do it. And we are responsible for doing that. That is what one of the core pieces of being heathen is accountability. And I think that that is something that is severely lacking in modern culture today. So,
Something that reminds me of, which is a big pet peeve of mine when it comes to modern heathenry, is those that in our belief system who consider themselves Lokian, and so they're just assholes
mm,
and play it off as well. I follow Loki, and he's the trickster. I'm like, no, you're just
yeah.
an asshole.
And Loki was an asshole and Locus Senna, so they take that as proof. That's
right.
yeah.
But look, he has his
Um,
merits, though. I do want to sort of
but
throw that in.
yeah,
But
I
he's
know,
not an
but I love. Go ahead. Go
but
ahead.
no, it's not an excuse to be an asshole. You are
That's
correct.
right.
I love how one of the I think it's in Locus Center where it says one of the verses is like, if Thor was there, you wouldn't have said that. You wouldn't have said that if Thor was here. He'd have
Yeah.
fucking whooped your ass, Loki.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is well said. Those are great points. Great points. So the last question for today, and then, like I said, we'll do a part two of this because there's just so much information I want to get in from you guys. So last question of the day is: how do heathens today engage with runes? Are they primarily a spiritual tool, a linguistic connection, or something else? Sanford, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Well, per Odin, they're all of the above.
Hmm.
No one knows if there were sigils different than the Futhork that Odin speaks of in the Havamal. You don't know; it's not given. Especially those within the Leodatal with the tally of songs. Personally, I think that those are the Galdrasafir, although many discredit those because the whole manuscripts came quite later. There was a lot of Christian influence, and some of them have Christian sigils on them, um, as well. However, some of the songs that I see described, they almost match in the Havamal with the description given in the whole manuscript. So I'm like, maybe that's a sigil that's associated with this song. And Mike Shell did a very interesting thing a couple years back on what the different aspects of different rune staves meant. So it's pretty interesting. And I just want to kind of read here. I wrote this out here. Let's take a look at what the Havamal says about runes. And it starts in Havamol 142, going through 144. It says, you will discover runes. This is from my personal translation. You will discover runes and guiding staves, magnificent and unerring. The mighty sage designed them, the sacred rulers created them, and raised them in the halls of the gods. Odin with the Aesir, Dane for the elves, Dvalin for the dwarves, Asvid for the Jotnar, and I raised some for myself. Asvid is, by the way, a name for Odin that some of the Jotnar gave him. I'm going to switch to the Old Norse because it's imperative with 144. Vestu, ve rista skall, vestu, ve rada skall, vestu, ve fa skall, vestu, ve frista skall, vestu, ve vidya skall, vesta, ve blota skall, ve senda skall, vesta, ve Svaskal. And my translation of that is, do you know how to write them? Do you know how to read them? There's your linguistics. Do you know how to inscribe them? Do you know how to examine them? Do you know how to invoke them? Do you know how to consecrate them? Do you know how to project them? Do you know how to sacrifice them? Rather, means to also can mean to divine them, and rista can be to raise or carve. By the way, carving is a form of invocation, using the power of that wood or substance into which it was marked in the esoteric practice. Fresta can be paint, which is another form of invocation, and blota is the most powerful invocation of all, which is by blood. So you can see it covers reading and writing. And even the writing and the reading can refer to divining, like you do, Mac, with your rune posts every friggin' day. Okay. And to write them can be to use them to create a spell or invocation, as we actually have archaeological evidence of today, where they were actually written down. They wrote a spell in runes on a piece of bone. So in all aspects, I say they're used for them all. They were a writing system for the common people, and they were also used for esoteric practice. And they have meanings. Are the meanings that we know today exactly what they used to have for them? We don't know.
And I say to build off of that, the meanings that generally everyone looks at today is more based off of the phonetic sound of the runes. So, couple things for baby heathens out there, anyone were to be watching. First of all, the Vikings never used the Elder Futhark. That's why it's called Elder. Like way before.
It went out of use about 200 years prior to the Viking Age beginning.
So the younger Futhark is what the Vikings used, which makes it a little bit more difficult to use. There's 16 letters, if you will. Made it very easy for the inscriber, the runer that was carving this into whatever and making it a spell. Because there's only 16 letters, it's very easy to hide that spell within that rune, or within that galder that you're creating for that. And there is no or very little historical significance to using the runes as divination. They were used for creating spells, creating galder symbols, writing, and things like that. But there is little to no record of them used as divination. But again, being a person like myself that believes in intent, if we put that energy into these runes,
Mm.
then that's what you're going to get out of them.
You both make such great points. My brain again. Sanford, you were going off, and I was just feeling ancient spirits like welling up inside of me. You know, it was amazing. So many things that you said just hit. When I know when I make the runes, and I'm making them aside from honoring the land bitter. When I'm making them, you're right. I'm invoking them as I carve them, and when I carve them, I think each one that I'm working on, what is this? What does it mean? You know, and that's why when I cast my runes, I do my daily runes. It's 3 runes with one oracle that kind of gives an influence over everything. But it takes me an hour to interpret them because I am studying them. My intent and purpose is going into this, and I'm drawing from it, what they will teach me. And so it's not as simple like, wealth and hardship are going to come your way, but, just wait a little while for the harvest. No,
To meet a tall, dark.
yeah, yeah. A tall, dark stranger will appear for
Yeah.
you with lots of money. There's
Well,
so much
kinda
that goes into it.
Point two, which I think is very important when you are doing those rune pulls, you really need to think about how those runes work together
Mhm.
or how they don't work together. Especially if you're doing a multiple rune draw like that. One rune can change the meaning of that entire draw.
And often it does.
I think a lot of that comes to play with prescience. Um, you know, it speaks of the gift of sight that Odin had, who is the one who discovered the runes and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
You know, when you put forward your intent, okay, and I've described the use of runes in magic as, if you just draw the runes without any intent, it's just lines, okay.
Mhm.
Any type of writing system, it doesn't mean anything without it supposed to be it requiring the representation of a phonetic sound, you know? And so it can be as simple as that, Dr. Jackson Crawford and Garth Hiker got into a big spat about it on a couple of years back about whether they were just a writing system or whether they were magical. And I was like, you're both right. Okay, so
Mhm.
shut up. Because the whole thing is like your intent, your focus. No line has magic. It's just a ink on a piece of paper, okay?
Right.
Or a mark made in wood. It's the energy focus, intent as it were, that you place into it, and it becomes then a conduit or a representation of that intent. And from that is where the actual managing goes. And that's why I love the part where it says to consecrate them. You could also use that as to charge them.
Charge.
You are placing energy into those runes. And when you do the pull, Mac, you have an intent to discover. And so therefore, what you understand those runes to represent
Mhm.
is how the universe then reveals to you the Cosmere, the cosmic Megan pool, as it were, pushes back its intent to you.
Mhm.
And you get a tiny glimpse through that focal point of those runes. You get a tiny glimpse of the actual carving of the Nornir upon the tree.
Mhm.
And you can see, and you can know.
Mhm. I always felt
That's,
like the magic and the essence of the runes like evolved like in Kanunga Gap, and when the Muspelheim and Niflheim met there, that the essence of the runes was born from that. And that's like for me like you're poking a small hole, into something to see, try to look at a much bigger picture. And you're right, I'm drawing with what I can from it, but there's just an essence, magic that in this realm, with our finite beings here, that we're not able to grasp all of it. So that's a concept I have with me for on the runes when
Yeah.
I'm thinking about them. So,
And
wow.
basically, it once again it comes into your perspective. If you just
Hmm.
see them as letters, they're just fucking letters to you. If
Hmm.
they are, if you see them as esoteric focus, having meanings, and that's what they are.
Right.
You know, the historical evidence we have, they were used to write, as Topher was pointing out. That's what we have.
Hmm.
However, there is that evolution and that migration, and then of course we have the hints that exist within the Eddas that we can procure. And, they're not going to go in detail in the Eddas. They were written by a Christian, and that kind of thing was taboo. That's why you
Hmm.
don't see a lot of esoteric practice listed within the Eddas because it was taboo by the person
Right.
who wrote it, or to the person who
Yeah. And to I think to enrich or to follow that, read other things that aren't related to the Eddas, but that were culturally important. The sagas of the Icelanders. Um, some like Swedish folklore. Like Norwegian folklore. Go and read that, and it will help you understand more. Like, okay, this
wrote. Read,
I I can see this isn't fitting in.
I would say to read books coming from the Celts,
Hmm.
especially if you have a female ancestor who is Celtic. All right. And I'm saying that because the mitochondrial DNA of the Celts is very much the same of the Nordic peoples. If you study the migrations of the peoples throughout Europe, the Germanics were originally Celts, and the Germanics and the Finno-Ugric, which were interestingly enough from the same migration as the Native Americans, um, they just went the opposite direction, um, is what created the Norse. Okay, so every Norse person has connection to Celtic lineage. They were first Celts. They were Celts before they were Norse. Okay, and so if you look into that, Ayla had a book, babe. If you could, I can't remember the name. It's like something about delving into the fairy faith, and they talk about the Tilbatheg and the Fae. A guy went and he freaking interviewed people. This was back at the turn of the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century. He went and traveled throughout Ireland, Isle of Man, and Wales, and Cornwall, and interviewed people who had seen the fairy folk.
Hmm.
Those aspects, I was sitting there listening, like, that's land vetir. That's this type of vetir. I'm going through there listening to it. They have more of their stuff intact because they mixed it with Roman stuff, and so therefore was acceptable to the church.
Hmm.
The Romans got there first before they were Christian, and so therefore some of it was saved. And they were better at writing stuff, probably because the Romans came and they wrote everything down. Okay? So look at that, because the parallels are so close. Even their deities, the Tuatha De
Hmm.
Danann and the Aesir, are very closely connected, and some of them connect to the Vanir more. And even within, I cannot remember the four something, they align a lot with Yoda. Okay,
Hmm.
so you can find that, and there's a lot more information out there. And if you want to talk more about that and the incorporation of Celtic and Nordic faith, I would encourage you to talk to my lady Ayla,
Hmm.
because she knows way more about the Celtic, especially than I do. So um, that's where I would go. But study that stuff too.
Hmm.
And even like reading into the Slavic and the Baltic, or the Balkan, the Slavic, Baltic, and Balkan histories, because those people is where the Celts came from, is in the Balkans. So you can gain that information um, from those things, and you'll discover older stuff, and you can actually start to see a transition as to where Odin went from Wotan as to Odin. Okay, you can see the
Mhm.
transition of faith.
Yeah.
That's what I encourage.
Yeah. Thank you, Ayla, for posting in the comments the sources so people can check them out. That is good stuff. Good stuff. The version of the Havamal that I use is called The Words of Odin, and it's by Robin Artisan. And the part that I love about it's broken into 3 sections. You have his interpretation, and then in the section is the reference. And what he does in the reference is he explains the kennings, and he kind of lifts the veil of Christianity off of it. So you kind of like really get to see what the true intent probably would have been without the lens of Christianity over it. And then the third section is it's all in Old Norse. I'll drop a link for that in the comment section for anyone that's interested in that. But it is such a good version of, I think, of the Havamal because it explains all of that. It gives a different, it gives a true look at what uh, the intent probably was, or the story, without that Christian lens on it. So, I'll drop that in the comment section. But yeah, any last words? The last words, like this is it for you guys.
Words. Hopefully, this isn't my last words.
Enjoy the next
I plan on
24
dying
hours.
afterwards, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
Yeah, instead of saying have a nice day, I'm just gonna say enjoy the next 24 hours.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate talking to you all.
It's been very insightful for me. I thank you guys so much for allowing me this opportunity.
Thank you both.
I love what you do, Mac. I love what you do, Mac. It's a
Uh,
good way to bring us together and help us share information.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you two will stay on, though, so I can give you a proper goodbye. And for everyone else, Sanford, Topher, thank you guys so much for being here, sharing your knowledge, your insight, your wisdom. It's just definitely so appreciated. And we're going to say goodbye to the audience. And then Topher, Sanford, I will say goodbye to you. Everyone else, have the most awesome day. And we'll see you on the next episode. I'll let you know when that is.